In this new era, these online tournaments serve as content aggregates, dealing out a new product to be consumed every week. The FGC itself becomes very small, with a rotating cast of broadcasters and player influencers being the only recognizable figures amongst a sea of names on a Start.gg bracket, as developers step in to put more online events into their tournament circuits. Control is slowly ceded over to them. The community becomes the most memeable viral moments on an app formerly known as Twitter, which can gin up views for a couple weeks. That's a pretty grim picture that Tanner, the creator of the Them's Fighting Herds FGC blog, paints for the future of the FGC. It's pretty dystopian compared to the FGC that we have now. Or maybe it's not that bad of a future. The FGC needs more content after all, but what am I kidding? Increased publisher control is far more than enough cause to hit that big red alert button. While I don't think it's as bad as described, fighting game publishers are starting to abandon the community built around their games in order to take more control of it. Now, I know what you're thinking. How could I say that? Capcom Cup just gave away $2 million to 28 players and is going to do it again next year. And to that I say, at what cost? As on the surface, it looks just like that. Capcom is just raining down cash on FGC. But when you dig a little deeper, this is throwing salt on the wound. Capcom has remade the playing field in its own image and forced everyone to sacrifice the core community pillars and competitive integrity in order to do so. But don't worry, Capcom isn't the only one, as Mortal Kombat also picked up the same model, meaning 2 of the big 3 fighting game series has turned their back on all but the top level of the FGC. But it gets worse. Right now, most of the other gaming studios have yet to make the same power move as Capcom and NetherRealm Studios. But with a game like Project L, it alone can set the new standard of publisher dealings with the FGC. And knowing how Riot likes to treat their games, we may already be locked into Tanner's timeline. So to start this off, we have to go back and look at something that seemingly has nothing to do with fighting games in the first place. The tech industry. Yes, we all love the tech industry. Your YouTubes, your Facebooks, TikToks, Netflix, all that good stuff. Well, throughout the last 30 years, these tech giants have pretty much popped out of nowhere to make money at a rate almost unheard of. Early investors of these companies made extremely large amounts of money, which led to other investors to come out the woodwork to find new tech companies in order to basically bet on the next big thing. Investors tend to have a lot of money to throw around, so constantly putting money into the tech slot machine was fine for them. So things got competitive, and the slot machines started asking for more and more money, leading to something we like to call the tech bubble, where everything in tech was so inflated with overperceived value that it couldn't last long before the gambling frenzy would end, and all investors would take a pause and say, wait a minute, this is stupid, and pull all of their money out of the industry, which is what is basically happening now. Now, what does this have to do with fighting games and the FGC? Well, fighting games are in fact part of the tech industry, and the FGC benefited greatly from it. During the time esports was on the rise, and investors were dumping money into competitive gaming like crazy. Though the FGC was considered an off-brand subsector of it, we still got a rather large influx of cash. Larger events got sponsors that paid a lot of money to help TOs pay for the event, and because they no longer had to worry so much about operating costs of the event, they started to pay people more. Streamers were able to get upgrades from the extra money being handed out, pretty much creating the new tournament standard that we have now with production and equipment. On the player side of things, there was a whole lot of sponsorship money going around for higher level players, even though again, the FGC was treated like a secondary pickup compared to the big games like Overwatch, League, Dota, Counter-Strike, etc. That time of great prosperity could be directly credited to the tech bubble. Unfortunately, the good times couldn't last. as the pandemic put an end to all of that. Even years later, the effects of the pandemic really did a number on the FGC, and still continues to do so today. While we can point to several reasons why, let's limit it down to two: the tech bubble popped and post-pandemic inflation. It's quite a 1-2 punch if you're a TO. The tech bubble popping caused all the sponsorship money to dry up as investors no longer wanted anything to do with competitive gaming. So TOs had to go back to paying everything out of their own pocket. But that's a hard thing to do. The event standard that was created thanks to tech bubble money has been the new standard for so long that a whole generation of fighting game players came in and saw it as the norm. And let's be honest, not even old heads want to go back. So you're pretty much stuck with the increased bill. There is no going back to the old level of quality because you don't want to be the one to take that reputation hit. No one wants their event to be known for being lower quality. But then it gets worse with post-pandemic inflation. The cost of quality was already high with no one else to help pay. But now operation cost has gone up even higher due to everything basically costing more. Even event venue rentals. The cost of doing business was now just far too high. And a lot of larger events that weren't super majors just died off. Now, you business majors out there are probably asking, how could this be? More people are going to offline events now more than ever. Well, it's not that simple. Of course, having more players pay more money should cover the cost, but you are missing one key element: venue space. And you can also include equipment in there, but venue space is the big one. Venues can only hold but so many people, and in order to hold more people, you need a bigger space that costs more, which means you need even more people to cover, and so on. I hope you're getting the death loop here. By all means, this is a good problem, but it's also a pretty deadly problem as well, because the event is at risk if operation costs are not met. TOs are stuck between a rock and a hard place, but perhaps maybe there is a secret third big hit to the FGC, one that no one really saw coming. Due to the pandemic not allowing everyone to host offline events, people moved online to play games, which led to the growing need for games to create better netcode. As much as the FGC flocked to games with rollback netcode, as well as demand the ones that didn't to switch over. This was, and still, the correct thing to do. Fighting games are social games after all. You should make it your mission to make it easier for players to play your game with other people. Despite all the trouble that the pandemic caused, this is the big thing to come out of it. Starting with Strive being the first major fighting game release to actually use rollback netcode. Those Strive's online netcode, let's be honest. Strive's network mode was, is, and probably will forever be flawed. It got the ball rolling, as everyone else followed suit. Well, mostly followed suit. A few games still run on old delay base, or worse yet, peer-to-peer. And then you have Tekken, which uses some kind of confusing hybrid because they wanted to be so special. Or maybe they had a good reason, I don't know. I'm not a game developer. Better Online also meant that online tournaments were now slightly more legitimate. No longer were they something that could be easily written off, but mirrored offline gameplay enough for people to give it some competitive weight. Because with better netcode, less silly things could happen. But please understand, I said less. That mirror is still a pretty blurry one. But again, this is a good thing, as people who couldn't go to local events or didn't have one could have a solid way to practice playing in a competitive space, even though it's just your room. But your room is pretty convenient, don't you think? So I've been talking a lot about how rollback caused the rise of online tournaments, and the community around those as they got more popular. But what is so bad about them? I mean, this is a gloom and doom video after all, so what's wrong? So, here is when I explain to you how fighting game studios have abandoned the FGC. It's important to understand that I'm not talking about player support. I actually think that player communication is at an all-time high, and it's nice to see studios actually listening to their player base, for better or worse. The issue comes from the lack of support to the TOs of the community. And I'm not talking about your local 20-person tournament. I'm talking about your big offline tournaments, majors, and larger regionals. With few exceptions, they all have been abandoned, and it's all because of the change in the World Tour models. Yes, World Tours, the peak of fighting game competition. People play in tournaments all over the world for the chance to get an invite to the big World Tour Finals tournament in hopes of winning the title of the best in the world for a whole year, plus the money, power, and fame that comes with it. Now, with the old World Tour model, events where you can earn invitational invites were pre-selected offline events. While they weren't exactly putting the World and World Tour series, as most of them were in the US, Japan, and a sprinkle of other parts of the world. Just being a qualifying tournament was a huge buff to the event. People from all over the world would go to these tournaments, and TOs whose events got selected loved to support. Offline events back then were hard carried by being a qualifier. Some even lived or died based on being a stop for at least one World Tour. Now enter Capcom Cup 10 and Mortal Kombat 1 Pro Competition. These two World Tours introduced a new model, one mostly based on online tournaments run by in-house groups, or groups hired by the publishers. Very few offline tournaments were given slots. In fact, Capcom Cup only had 3, one being EVO, of course, while the other 2 were in-house created tournaments instead of community-made ones. And Pro Competition had 4. With one being again in-house, while the other 3 were actually community-based tournaments, these being Combo Breaker, East Coast Throwdown, and Ultimate Fighting Arena. So the question becomes why? Why the big sudden change? We already see that online play for fighting games have gotten better, at least good enough to blur the line between online and offline play. But why? Why was there almost a full World Tour extraction from community events? Well, it's actually pretty easy to understand why. It's about control. With in-house online tournaments, you can guarantee a safe, well-ran production with a consistent level of tournament quality, leaving out any crazy moments that come with the FGC's rough and tumble ways. You can also cast a wider net and host events everywhere and anywhere that there is a good enough internet connection. I can't really argue with the fact that this does help a lot of people. This new model allows World Tours to actually be World Tours, as players no longer have to save up money and get passports in order to go to an offline event. Even the recent Capcom Cup showed a lot of players from different places that was actually able to hang with the well-known, stronger players from well-known regions. So players were helped. Publishers now have more control and have to deal with far less brand risk. Spectators now have a much cleaner and more smoothly ran show with less accidents, which makes it better to watch. The only groups that are directly hurt by this new model are community TOs, which kinda doesn't matter because the top cut of TOs are all getting hired anyway, so it shouldn't really matter, right? Good times all around, right? Well, are you crazy? When did giving more control to publishers ever been a good idea? Despite the game's representation, ease of entry, and a better stream experience that these online-based World Tours produce, we have to go back and understand that the core of the FGC has always been the offline experience. I'll even go as far as to say that if you haven't experienced an offline event with your friends, you are currently missing out on the true FGC experience. Honestly, there's truly nothing better within FGC. Finding a new rival, striking up a random conversation that turns into a 2-hour argument, cheering for your friend when they get on the main stage, having them cheer for you, stuffing 20 people in a hotel room for a game session, after tournament dinners, asking people for help with the game, playing random games that you have never heard of before, having a pool party at the hotel pool, hanging out at somebody's house to party and play games, doing stuff outside of fighting games with each other, allegedly breaking the hotel's rules and costing Jabali money. But you wouldn't do that, right? Tanner used the phrase, the little things, when describing all of this, and I think that's right. At these events, it really is the little things that keep people coming back and keep the FGC growing. But in almost super villain levels of betrayal, publishers are willing to sacrifice all of that for more control, even to crazy levels like with Nintendo tournament licenses, leaving offline events in a state of suffering as support isn't coming. The game studios are leaving to do their own thing. Investors and sponsors are treating FGC like it's radioactive if it isn't EVO or EVO related. TOs now has to start becoming more creative with funding now. But what if the worst happens? What if we all go online? Well, have you seen the online community? Compared to the offline FGC, the online FGC is a pretty muted experience. Ways of communication between people are pretty limited. It's hard to communicate or see the wide range of emotions that comes from playing fighting games through text or post-tournament interviews. Unless they stream, there is no way of seeing that roller coaster of emotion that is one of the strengths of competitive gaming in general. Worse yet, the online community of the FGC has gotten big enough to where it has adopted the general online community garbage that all online communities kind of meld into once enough people join. I mean, you could just take a small look at the FGC Twitter or the comment section of FGC videos and you'll see what I'm talking about. Arguments over nothing of real worth. People talking past each other. People have little to nothing to do with the actual community. Start firestorms. Dumb drama that leads to nowhere. Discourse that leads to nowhere. And some really weird sub-pockets of people coming in. And I don't use weird lightly. I play anime fighting games. That puts me at least a few layers down the iceberg. But even knowing that, I can recognize a trench when I see one. Overall, the online FGC experience is a place where very little is actually productive and is there to collectively waste everyone's time. Not you guys though. I think I'm pretty lucky to have such a great lot watch my videos. Your comments are a great joy to read, so I actually thank you for that. Now that I think about it, it's pretty weird. The FGC is a pretty niche community. So you wouldn't think that it's large enough to adopt the standard online community traits. But unfortunately, fighting games in general are pretty mainstream. You can pretty much go to anyone and show them a Street Fighter or a Tekken character, and they'll probably know who that is. So I guess, it is what it is. Notice while I'm saying all this, I'm also skipping over the various issues that come from running an online bracket. There are some glaring issues when it comes to online tournaments that take away from it being serious competition. You have to deal with laggy connections, disconnects, Wi-Fi connections, multi-bracketing, general distractions that come from the player's home, and other stuff that comes from not being right beside the other person for that matter. Online tournaments lead to a lot of extra elements that can get away of pure competition. Sure, you can take the trade-off with the pros of online tournaments, but it's still an inferior experience. Sadly, this is the experience that large studios are building up to right now. They are willing to sacrifice offline tournaments and pure and stable competition for control, which to me is the biggest letdown to this new World Tour model. Sure, the new model will keep EVO and some affiliates in there, but they also say screw the rest. That's pretty messed up if you ask me. And we are lucky that not all studios have switched to this model, but when two of the big three fighting game franchises switch, it's only a matter of time. And the worst part is, I get it. The new online model makes too much sense. There is so much to be gained for having control of the peak of competition that is World Tours. They should be taken seriously. This is what all serious competitors look for, the chance to be called the best and win all of that prize money. And the level of production that that event deserves should match that. You don't want anyone saying something crazy on the mic. You don't want a crappy production crew. You don't want player beef playing out on stage. I mean, I do. That stuff is pretty funny. And it also adds color. Well, to a certain point that is. But to companies looking to get money back from their funding, they want to keep things as clean as possible. It makes sense. Another part is, while inflation is screwing over the TOs, it is also screwing over the players as well. Traveling to events is expensive, and the price is still going up, and some people just can't come out to anything. Online World Tours gives them a chance to actually compete at a high level, even if it's a subpar experience. Again, it's a wider net with a much lower bar to entry. With both of these pros, the players are definitely helped out. Even I would say there is definitely good to come out of this, but that's only on the surface. Think deeper. If World Tours are online now, why go to offline events in the first place? Especially if you want to compete at a high level. Now, as I say this, big long-standing events are pretty exempt from this. You can pretty much say because it's EVO, or because it's CEO, because it's Combo Breaker, and people would understand. Long-standing events with legacy get to ride off with the fact that winning their event means something, because the event itself is a symbol of FGC, and therefore important. Now the rest are pretty much screwed. Well, screwed is not the word for it. I think the better way of saying it is at a major disadvantage. Yeah, that's better. Think about it. Why go to a local or regional, or even some majors for that matter? If you just want competition or practice, I mean, sure, why not? But why play money to practice where you can just go to one of the free-to-enter online tournaments that are out there? They provide you with way more efficient practice than going to a local. A local can't train you for various online tomfoolery that you are bound to see in online tournaments. How about entering offline tournaments to make money? Well, still no, because depending on how things play out, you can get top 8 or win a game at some large event and still come out even or worse, or maybe slightly better. So what about clout? Well, in most cases, locals and regionals are not the best place for that. Most tournaments don't have a stream following like that, so not that many people are going to watch. And well, for most places, no one really cares if you're the best player in your area. At this point, the main reason you would go to an offline tournament if you are there purely as a competitive player is to basically build a following. Winning majors or other events people still care about, or at least getting close to winning, does bring more eyes onto you, which if you're smart, you would use that to build your brand. But that's a topic for another video. I guess what I'm saying here is that this new online meta, this new normal, has already made most offline events irrelevant to people at the top level of play. And low-key, people want to get to the top as well. This new online meta has sacrificed competitive integrity for a larger reach and ease of entry. And yes, online tournaments are a sacrifice of competitive integrity for reasons already stated. So, what does this have to do with Project L? 2SKO, or I'm just gonna call it Project L from now on, which I pretty much called it Project L this whole time, but whatever, it's a dumb name. Project L is the decider. If there are two things that publishers are really good at doing, is screwing over others in the name of making money and badly copying the business practices of others, also in the name of money. Now, Riot is really good at the former, but actually quite bad at the latter. Riot, having League of Legends as the top dog of esports for more than a decade now, was no accident. In fact, to be honest, within its own genre of games, League was never really the best. During its early years, it lacked the polish and graphical fidelity that Heroes and Nurif had. It never had the sheer amount of player customization tools or competitive prize pools that Dota 2 has. Sure, those are two cop-outs given that they are the big League alternatives. But even compared to the rest of the MOBA genre, League as a game was lower quality and never really excelled at anything compared to the rest. Yet, League is the most popular MOBA by a long shot. Now, why is that? Well, Riot is smart. Riot knew if they focused on making everything around the game easy to latch onto, people would come to it. So they perfected the free-to-play model, knowing full and well that all they had to do was capture the market. It didn't matter if League didn't look as good or had less features. As long as it was free and tons of people played it, it didn't matter. Riot could make their money back through skin sales and other microtransactions. Their model worked crazy well. Even to this day, it's still one of the best free-to-play models out there. At least the ones that didn't go crazy like Fortnite, Overwatch, and pretty much everyone else in the AAA gaming industry. But this has been Riot's main strategy as they move to other genres, basically leveraging their brand power and better business models to reach to the top, each with a new business model optimized for that genre. And to that I say Project L is going to be no different. Given Riot's brand power, Riot's resources, and the fact that they have 3 of the 4 creators of EVO directly creating the game, with the Cannon Bros having the directorial position in both Radiant Entertainment the gaming studio creating Project L, which also was created by them, and is now a subsidiary of Riot Games, and Evo. You can pretty much see it now. Project L has tons of influence within the FGC from the get-go, and if Project L's model shows any form of success, the model that Riot comes up with for Project L is most likely going to become the default for fighting games into the future. That includes world tours. Now, history tells us that Riot likes to go in-house for their main circuits, and this is probably where the new model of world tours came from in the first place. As I said before, publishers are really good at badly copying the business practices of others. I just guess some wanted to hop on the train early. But let's be honest for a second. The new online world tour does the most for Riot. It gives them the most control, which allows them to keep the content train rolling, so people can follow the storylines with as little random elements as possible. Sure, they can modify it a bit, maybe do more of a hybrid approach like Tekken, but why give up control? And only for a small subset of people that play the game. It's safe to say, unless some miracle happens, the future of world tours is online, and therefore the future of competitive fighting games is online and in the hands of publishers. It's almost like we're course correcting back to esports. What a shame. So what now? I guess it kinda leads to the only way out of this mess. Taken to its extremes, this situation will cause the FGC to be controlled by the game studios, and most of the offline events are squeezed to death by higher and higher costs of doing business. That sucks. It will make for a less tight-knit, lamer FGC, and no one wants that. Of course, it will probably never get there, but it still presents big issues for the offline FGC. Offline events need to evolve, but how? I'm not going to lie to you. This is a really tough question, and I'm sure you're already thinking of answers that you can put into the comments. As a TO, I generally want to know, how can offline events prove themselves to be better than a controlled alternative? At least enough to get people to go to the event. How do offline events set themselves up for success, so they don't have to worry about game publishers pitching in to survive, or anyone else but the players and spectators for that matter? The only answer that I can think of is to get more creative. Find new ways to make money for events. Find new gimmicks and activities to make the event more hype. Make it so offline events have so much prestige and are so fun to go to that they no longer can be ignored. But that's hard, costs more money, and worse yet, you don't really know what people will take to or not, meaning a whole lot of trial and error, which is super scary when you're strapped for cash. But it needs to be done. I've been thinking about this a lot last year, so allow me to give some pretty cool examples from tournaments I went to last year. Starting with Beast in the East, better known as Bite, taking place in Hampton, Virginia. Bite is a very interesting event. It is an international rhythm game tournament with plenty of games and arcade machines as far as that I can see. That just so happens to have a regional fighting game tournament attached to it. Now, if you didn't know, I enjoy rhythm games. Mostly Stepmania X, Pump It Up, Waka, Taiko, and that one game that won't be named. But when people are hitting triple S on the hardest difficulty on games like that, you tend to decide that you are not ready to enter games like that yet. But what made Bite so cool was the fact that when I got knocked out of all the fighting game tournaments I entered, I had so much fun playing the rhythm games that were there, and the people there gave me tips and tricks to get better. And since the event was more focused on rhythm games, I got to play on arcade games that always had long lines in front of them at majors. Events like these combine communities together in order to grow the event. A very creative solution, if you ask me, and it's made even better due to the fact that rhythm games are one of the fighting game adjacent hobbies that fighting game players like to do outside of fighting games, along with watching anime, playing card games, and for some reason Final Fantasy XIV. You know, the MMO one. Another event I went to was CEO Taku. While this event was pretty much a smaller anime themed CEO, the feel of this event was less serious and more like a party. While the competition was hard, in fact, the pools in CEO Taku were much harder than regular CEO. Every day was pretty much a pool party, where there was a 24-hour room where we just played games, sing karaoke, swim in the pool, watch the Arc Revo qualifier, just do whatever and have fun, pushing everything that makes offline events the best. If there was a tournament that embodies the little things, it would have been CEO Taku last year. Last up was TNS9, which was this year, but we'll count it anyway. TNS is interesting. While TNS was known for its online tournaments now, I felt like this was a really important event, as I believe TNS is the blueprint to how future online tournaments should operate. TNS grew in size as an organization. It gathered up a team and used the money made from online tournaments to bring back TNS, the regional, an event long thought to be dead for years. Now, I would like to put a little note here and say that TNS is also the mainstreamer for a few majors now, and you have to find a different way to get to TNS's level, because you don't have the support, clout, and Bulba shop that Tong has. But hey, the blueprint is there, and all online TOs need to learn how to build a stream that gets more than 100 viewer average, but that's a different video. And to best describe TNS9, take CEO Taku, make it smaller, but give focus to more of the side attractions. For example, CEO Taku had karaoke in its side 24-hour room. At TNS, karaoke was on the main stage. So yeah, that's what I was talking about. There are even more events out there changing things up to adapt to new post-pandemic issues, like events being linked up to universities who are more than willing to allow free or reduced school venue usage, or the creation of the boutique tournament, where the game list and the focus is limited down to a smaller sub-communities, like Climax of Night and Slashback. The new focus on merch sales, marketing techniques, and the list goes on and on. Events like these show me that no matter what Riot does, the FGC will still be able to run after Project L comes in and decides to solidify the trend with world tours. Even though I still have a small sliver of hope that Project L would help community-created events. Because this worrying trend of online focused events leading up to the big invitational show is pretty much trying to course correct fighting games into a more traditional esports model, which doesn't work. There's pretty much no reason to actually do this, other than to keep control and save on resources. But even taking that into account, this is still not the way. I ask that Riot doesn't follow suit, and even then, I think it's time to solve the community's money problems and figure out how to make offline events so fun to go to that people go out of their homes to go. This video is kind of like a part 2 to my esports is dead video, so if some stuff doesn't make sense, go ahead and watch that video. I would like to thank you for watching, and let's keep this conversation going in the comments. As a TO myself, I would like to see more cool stuff at tournaments and help solve the money problem that TOs are dealing with currently. Also take a look at them's fighting words. I'll leave a link in the description. While I don't think I agree with the angle, Tanner brings up some very good points, and it's a pretty good read, though kinda Debbie Downer, but hey, it's near here or there. So until next time, I'm thinking I'm feeling like a brawl video coming on.